Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Aram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel, and unusually joined by Botox Media. I believe that is his legal name,
Yep.
and
Full
we are
On the
Christian
here.
birth
name.
birth certificate, yeah.
Yeah,
His
we are here
mom's
to
like,
talk
this
about
boy's be
Pokemon.
talking media. Mhm.
We're talking media, we're talking Pokemon, particularly we're talking Pokemon Gen 8 in a little bit of a retrospective fashion as we get ready for the impending launch of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But if you want to talk to
Impending
us about
doom,
Pokemon,
as some have been
could be
saying.
Doom, could be happiness, probably be Doom, but I'm an old annoying skeptic, as we'll get into in Gen 8. But if you want to counteract me with some positivity, join our Discord, link as usual, top of the description right down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. And one more plug, we got Bo here. Subscribe to his channel. I'll
Yeah.
leave the link right down there. I'll write a couple paragraphs as I have been, nice little summation, and then I'll put Bo's link. You should go check him out. He's a lot of cool
Put a
videos.
bow on it, you
Watch
know what I'm
his
saying?
pickup videos. That's my favorite kind of content you make, Bo. It's my favorite. I love those fucking pickup videos. But you know what I love even more than that? Talking about Pokemon Gen 8. And there's kind of two questions we're trying to answer here in our discussion. That is, was Gen 8 any good? And how did it evolve the Pokemon franchise? Now, the second question is probably easier to answer than the first.
Yeah.
But before we even dive into that, into the individual games, boys, I want a high level answer to this question here. What do you think about Pokemon Gen 8? And Bo, you're the guest. You go second. I faked you out there.
Damn, you
Oh.
blue balled me. I was
Okay. All
ready.
right.
Ready at the hip. All
Well, I
right,
guess
Tucker.
I've been handed the reins here. Gen 8 is the most conflicted I've ever been about a Pokemon Gen. Not that I grew up with every Pokemon generation. I started with Gen 4, so 1, 2, and 3 I had to sort of retrospectively go back and play some of those games. But experiencing Gen 8 as it was flying at us, we're catching things right overhead, boom, grab that. I, for the first time, realized there was a possibility that I wouldn't like a Pokemon game. This is the first time in my life that a mainline Pokemon game came out that I didn't like it. But also, it showed me that Pokemon can evolve in ways that I had never even thought of before. So I think this is probably the most interesting Pokemon single generation we've ever gotten, and maybe ever will get. We'll see how we continue down into the future. Of course, these games are never going to stop. We're going to be 80 years old, and Gen 25 is going to be out, and we're like, hey, hell yeah. But yeah, conflicted is my summary word.
Yeah, I would
Oh,
agree with that. I think, and we'll get into individual games like you said. I think Sword and Shield, despite its many faults, is actually a really good game. But Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are not good games. And Let's Go, I came to love them over time. I did not like them when they came out, and I don't know. Gen 8 is just like you said. It's I'm conflicted because it has two not great games, but I think it has two of some of the best games, especially when you look at it from a competitive angle.
Mm.
And I don't know, Gen 8.
God damn
It's
Gen
been a
8.
weird time. It's been a weird time to be a Pokemon fan.
Yeah,
And one thing I will say, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I do really appreciate how unique each game has been, though. Even though I don't
absolutely.
like BDSP and Let's Go as much, every game does have its own identity, and that's something that did not used to be the case.
Mm-mm.
They all visually looked very distinct. They all play and have different mechanics. So, if nothing else, Gen 8 should be remembered for that. Each game was unique.
Yeah.
yeah, I think the uniqueness is interesting because I chalked it up in part to like a lack of quality where it should be.
Mm.
I think that Game Freak has gotten a lot of undue passes. How about I'll say for Generation 8, and I think that a lot of sort of the variance has come from this sort of space where they can just kind of throw shit at the wall, and if it sticks, it sticks. And if it doesn't, people kind of look ahead to the next game that is literally
Yeah.
less than a calendar year away, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I part of me, as somebody who felt Pokemon getting very constricting in how homogenized it was, found Gen 8 to be very exciting in terms of the variance, as you're saying, Bo. But I also think that the quality is maybe lower than it has been in a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really unfortunate position to be in when you contextualize it against the juggernaut that is Pokemon in terms
Mm-hmm.
of financial reach, in terms of importance and resonance. I just think that the Pokemon games shouldn't be coming out in the state they're coming out in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's Go to me is the only Pokemon game of the generation that feels polished to the standard I expect from Pokemon. To
Yeah.
and it's very mechanically different, but that felt like a complete idea. We've had plenty of Pokemon games that have their own idea, right? And they bring their own unique element. Not usually as large as something like Legends Arceus, but you think about Soar in Gen 6 and how beautifully rendered and executed that was. And you look at a lot of the half-assed ideas we get here, like Pokemon following 9 miles behind your trainer in the DLC for Sword and Shield, and I just wonder, where did that polish go? And
Yeah.
my hope is that all that polish is being funneled into much more ambitious and interesting Generation 9. But what's going to be interesting for me in this discussion is sort of looking at what I think are a set of games that have been criticized, but in my opinion, not criticized enough. Because we're talking about maybe the biggest media franchise in the world, or one of them at least. And I don't think it's reaching the bar of quality it should be.
Yeah,
It's certainly a lot of half steps. I think that's the best way to explain what's happening with
Yeah.
Pokemon. And I don't know, the quality thing's weird because I don't know, is Sword and Shield actually lower quality than Sun and Moon? Is it actually? I don't know if it is. I think Game Freak is just they were a handheld developer, so it's been hard for them to move on, and that's not an excuse. They should have the money to fix this, but I do think it's worth noting that like they are released yearly and they were making handheld games. Going to Switch was not easy, but at the same time, Let's Go is the most polished Pokemon game, and that was the first one they did, so that's a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I think you're raising what is sort of what was sort of widely known to be a development challenge for Nintendo as a whole in terms of its teams with the Wii U in particular. I mean, a lot of those game droughts are because Nintendo had no clue how to transition from standard definition development to HD. I mean, that was a well-documented issue. I just feel like by the time you get to 2019, I give them a little bit less slack than
especially because at that point it's already been over 2 years since the Switch release. Like it had been almost 3 years by the time Sword and Shield came out. It had been 2 years and 3/4. So the development time, of course, partially put into Let's Go, finishing up Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I don't really know how the teams break down in terms of who exactly was doing what, but that switch over to Sword and Shield does, in my opinion, feel like the first time the Pokemon mainline games have taken a dip, because you look at the wild area and it's not a fully formed idea. You look at the way that it's structured in terms of the routes and the story being like really weirdly backloaded, and the unfinished cutscenes notoriously in the gyms. There are elements of that game that for the first time as a person who had been playing these Pokemon games yearly as they came out, that I was like, hold on, whoa. They can do unfinished ideas? Because you think about Sun and Moon, like I mean, that's one of my favorite games of all time. I love Gen 7, I love Sun and Moon, I love Oras, I love X and Y, but these are games that have like areas that are like incomplete. The people are like, where's the battle place? What's the thing called from Emerald that
Battle
people
Frontier.
are mad? The Battle Frontier. Sorry, I don't care about the battling. So
When are people going to shut up about the Battle Frontier?
Sure,
please.
Where does that train go in X and Y? Like, why is there a lockdown thing? But those games still felt polished in what was there, and Sword and Shield was kind of the first time that I felt something wasn't polished, that they were actively missing things, and the quality was starting to dip.
I think it's sort of thing of like the stakes were so high and they had all the resources at their fingertips to avoid some of the presentational issues, let's say, because they had Monolith working with them, right? I mean, they were given
Godspeed, Monolith, you're working on everything.
Yeah,
Thanks, boys.
They were given all of the tools they needed, really, and nonetheless, I think that talking about cut content from Pokemon game is always tenuous because there's basically no Pokemon game without cut content. But I think cut corners feel more obvious in the context of Sword and Shield when, and I am far from a graphics whore. I love a good AA presentation. I loved every edge of Bayonetta 3. But when you're talking about Pokemon, I just think that you need to sort of change the goalposts a little bit when you have AAA resources and access to that, but you end up with an open world area wherein 3 feet to the left there's a sandstorm and 3 feet to the right it's snowing. And so I just failed to see with Sword and Shield in particular, and it seems like that's where we're going to kind of begin the conversation. I failed to see the Pokemon Company doing anything other than throwing a bunch of ideas at the home console dartboard without maybe the polish, sure, with a much larger scope, but without, I think, the polish that is so important to a franchise of this scale. But Bo, I want to make sure I get you back in the conversation here. So why don't you take me through Sword and Shield at a high level? What do you think about these games in particular?
I think mechanically Sword and Shield are the best games. I think,
Sure.
Although I don't like Gigantamax as much as Mega Evolutions, from a competitive standpoint, and I don't play competitive Pokemon, but seeing a lot of that community, Sword and Shield is the fan favorite. Like, it's not even close.
Hmm.
These are the most balanced games. They've done the most interesting with like new gimmicks. And for me, as someone who usually focuses on multiplayer with Pokemon, the wild area, although yes, very unpolished, and going online in the wild area was awful. The lag was bad. The max raids, and then with the DLC, the Dynamax Adventures, that just added so much more replay value. And it brings me back to X and Y. I don't know if you guys had this experience, but the PSS system they added in that game was the best thing Pokemon's ever done.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Wonder Trading.
Yes, and they still have like
and the
surprise
O
trades,
powers
but
and stuff. A lot of fun.
it was so much good on 3DS. Yeah, and then they removed it from Sun and Moon with freaking Festival Plaza. What the hell was that?
That sucks.
But the multiplayer features I think is the biggest point for me in Sword and Shield, and that's why I actually ended up liking those games. It kind of brought me back to X and Y a little bit, which was lost in Sun and Moon. So I think that's why I like them a little bit more. But I mean, you're totally right. They aren't polished games.
Mm-hmm.
The freaking tree. I mean, that's all I need to say.
Yeah, the thing about the tree and the visuals and the unpolishedness that I'm touting, though I still do like Sword and Shield. I think they are good games. I had a lot of fun with them. I played 90 hours of the games. It's like, I can't bring it down too much, but is that this was the first time, as I said, that I felt it was unpolished, but not only that, it was the first time when a Pokemon game wasn't like the most visually impressive game of its system. You think about Sun and Moon; those are beautifully rendered tropical environments. Some of the best looking games on that system, and Ultra Sun and Moon, which look even better. And Gen 6 maybe a little step down for that, but that was much earlier in the system. And you think about the pixel art of Gen 4 and 5 and 3 and 2. Like, these are always some of the best looking games of their system, and they are never look visually unpolished. But when you get to Sword and Shield, it's like, hold on, we just had like a month earlier we had Dragon Quest XI on that system, and that game looks leagues better than Sword and Shield. So I think it was the first time that I was like mentally put in conversation with the fact that Pokemon wasn't the height of its system. And even though I understand what you're saying about the multiplayer and these patches and being very balanced, never touched any of that. I don't think I ever did a raid battle. I've never battled anyone
raids?
online.
He's missing out, Bo.
Yeah.
Oh
don't care.
Goodness, that's the best thing
No.
they've added.
But I did have a lot of fun in terms of the wild area being a much more free-form way to experience Pokemon. It was the first time that felt like there was a place to like go back to and just like hang out and explore when Pokemon had been so linear up to that point. I do think that the step forward that Sword and Shield helped us take to getting to a more non-linear Pokemon game, to having a little more sense of exploration, that was really exciting for me, and still why I like those games.
Yeah, the reason that I find myself harping on the graphics, despite not really, as a player, caring a whole lot about the quality of graphics, is because I think that they are emblematic of larger issues with these games. Be it the lack of voice acting and the sort of knock-on effect presentation and storytelling and things like that. It's the effect of these problems and sort of the rushed element that frustrates me, because I think that the DLC for Sword and Shield is remarkably good, especially Frozen Tundra. Is that what it's called? I think so.
Crown Tundra.
Crown Tundra. I think that by the time I reached that point, to me, that was the natural conclusion of what Sword and Shield had been trying to do at release the previous year. And I really do think, as I said back in 2020 when I was playing that DLC, if Pokemon Company had just given Game Freak until holiday of 2020, Pokemon Sword and Shield, I think, would be remembered very, very fondly, because I think that base game was just 9 months of polish away from being excellent. And yeah, even with the DLC, there are still a lot of missing Pokemon, but people forget that Gen 3 was missing Pokemon when it launched. Obviously, as is sort of evident by the annoyance of lack of voice acting, expectations change, but I think people would have been, myself included, far more forgiving of the sort of lack of Pokemon, lack of, and all of these things, had we gotten that full package with that DLC on cart in 2020. Because, Bo, I am far closer to you, I think, than Tucker in my enjoyment of Sword and Shield, because I really do like these games a lot, despite what I feel are pretty obvious and overt objective issues with the presentation and pacing and structure and everything. Because I do think that raid battles are wonderful. I think that DLC is a whole hell of a lot of fun. I think that the wild area, for its shortcomings, was exciting as a Pokemon fan to see these big Pokemon trundling around that I could go up and encounter. I just think that Sword and Shield, more so than a lot of other Pokemon games, was victimized by its own release timing. I think it just wasn't quite ready because the framework, that skeleton is really great. I love I love making a camp with my Pokemon.
Yeah,
I
Pokemon
love
Camp's great.
walking around that wild area. I think that some of the best modern Pokemon designs come from these games. I just think that they needed more time, and that's kind of a theme I think we're going to hit on as we get deeper into this discussion.
And it only gets worse from here for that.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, talking about half steps again, looking after playing Legends Arceus and now seeing all this stuff for Scarlet and Violet, it is hard to look at Sword and Shield and not just think, oh, this was a prototype.
Yeah.
Because it really does in most of its aspects. The camp stuff is all refined in Scarlet and Violet. The open areas of the wild area were completely expanded, or maybe not completely expanded upon in Legends Arceus, but you get the idea.
Significantly.
So, yeah, they're significantly. So it is going to be interesting in 10 years looking back at Sword and Shield and just thinking, oh, are these actually even worth replaying? I don't think Sword and Shield, and we haven't talked about this yet, I don't think the story is anything to scoff. I mean, I think it's not good. I've talked to people that actually like it because it was like, oh, it's just a gym challenge and that's what Pokemon is. But coming off of Sun and Moon, which I think has the strongest characters at the very least of any Pokemon game, it was very disappointing.
Yeah.
So I do fear that, and I'm someone that likes to replay Pokemon games. I still bring out my GBA cards all the time and DS cartridges. I don't know if Sword and Shield will be that for me. Moving forward.
Tucker and I have long diverged on this point in particular, but I never want a story in my Pokemon games ever. I don't care about whoever didn't get the bag. I don't care what kind of wormhole we're walking through. Oh, what's the ethics of putting the Pokemon on the ball? I don't care. I'm putting it there. You know what I mean? Galar for me was an opportunity to reconnect with just the basic, I'm a little guy, maybe I'm 10, maybe I'm 14, it's unclear, leaving a house and going to do the gym challenge. But I think where I find common ground and disappointment with the story, Bo, despite my personal preference for this mode of storytelling for Pokemon, is that it's very jarring to arrive to a gym battle with cinematically framed cutscenes and moving mouth with dialogue boxes in complete silence. That to me is where I think that the lack of sort of like graphical technical parity with a game like Dragon Quest XI or Witcher 3 or Breath of the Wild or Xenoblade or whatever is felt the most. Because I don't mind a simplistic narrative in Pokemon, but when cutscenes cut away from action or when cutscenes don't give characters words coming out of their mouths, I find myself with you to where I'm like, the story, I couldn't even remember a single name of anybody in this story because they can't leave an impression.
That is absolutely not true.
Leon's the only memorable.
Oh, Schumbert. I remember him. Schumbert, whatever his fun friend. Whatever.
Swordsbert and Shieldbert.
Swordbert.
That's what it is.
Worst characters in the entire fucking franchise.
Tucker, what do you think of the story and the lore? Whatever you want to tackle it.
Well, see, my problem is not necessarily. That's a Pokemon reference.
Oh, it's a reference.
I'm gonna splash this one. All right. My problem with the story is not necessarily its lack of presentation. Like you said, I still think that's a problem, and it's going to be a problem in Scarlet and Violet because that has not changed. But is that it is very poorly paced, and I think that's the first time a Pokemon game has really felt that poorly paced to me. Is there is such a feeling of, oh shit, we forgot the story. Let's catch up on the story. When you're hitting like Gym 7, 8, and then like getting to Elite Four, they're throwing characters at you, they're throwing story concepts at you. You find out where Dynamaxing came from, and they're trying to pull in this lore of the Great Warrior with that, or maybe Zacian and Zamazenta, and then Eternatus comes out of nowhere, and Leon's doing this thing, and it's like, I can't tell what's happening. And I think that if that had been pulled out more across the length of the game, that would have balanced. Okay, it would have made me happy, but it probably would have made you less happy because then you wouldn't have gotten like 7/8 of the game where fucking nothing happens. Because you don't even really have an evil team in this game for whatever. You got Team Yell and they barely even exist. God, Team Yell.
You make a great point about them just shoving it all at the end. Because exactly, they do have that stuff that we want from like Black and White and Sun and Moon about like Eternatus. What even was Eternatus? It was like I don't even know, but it
Yeah.
was some fucked up shit,
Well,
and that's
but
cool.
you don't know,
I like
not
that.
because it was ridiculous,
Yeah.
but because it wasn't explained over the course of the story. When you think about the Ultra
Right.
Beasts or the Totem Trials or Tapu Koko saving fucking Cosmogs, like these are crazy things, but they are so established in the course of Sun and Moon's story that by the end you're fighting Lusamine and the other Ultramen. She's merged with Nihilego. It's ridiculous, but it
so
kind
cool.
of feels like
I loved it and remember it clearly.
it feels like it was led up to in a proper way. Why don't we turn tail though and
Sure.
and flip back to Let's Go, because that's where this all started.
Sure. Hell yeah.
'Cause-
I'll give my
oh, hold
Let's
on.
Go
Actually, no.
thoughts.
We should talk about the fact that Let's Go maybe not considered a Gen 8 game by some.
A lot of people would like to contest that, but I think that's stupid. I don't think, and I mean, this is a whole different discussion of like what a generation even means. Typically, people classify it as, oh, this is a lot of new Pokemon and like a new region. Obviously, Let's Go is Kanto, and it's just a remake, and we had 2 new Pokemon. But since it has a Pokemon that isn't in Sun and Moon, being Malmetal and Melton, for me, and it's on Switch, obviously different hardware. For me, it's clearly Gen 8, but a lot of people would disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I had never even thought about this question in my mind. I get where else would I think about it? I suppose.
Yeah.
But
And you're
I-
nuts.
And your toes, and your
Yeah.
toes.
don't feel it in my toes either. But I have poor circulation though, so who knows? But I suppose you would traditionally connote the new generation beginning with the new mainline game in that generation, right? I mean,
New region.
right? Like, sorry, that's what I meant. Like the new proper big old game. Like you wouldn't call Oraz a Gen 7 game, but I think that's. I just don't think it makes any sense to call. Here's why. I don't think it makes sense to call Let's Go a Gen 7 game because it can't talk to Gen 7 very easily. You know, there are barriers between it and the other Gen 8 games, but it is far more integrated into their Pokemon home ecosystem and everything. And as you're saying, Bo, it's got Melmetal. It's clearly defined by a different set of mechanics in the past games, and I guess games after it. It's a weird main game spin-off, whatever you want to call it. I call it the beginning of Gen 8, or at least the beginning of the Switch era Pokemon game, and that's uncontestable.
Yeah.
So, Bo, why don't you again hit us with those overarching thoughts about Let's Go?
Yeah, when Let's Go came out, I did not like it at all. And I mean,
Sure.
this was coming off of Pokemon Go, which obviously was a huge success, like I think 2 years prior. I mean, this is very like, it's not a real issue, but it kind of is. Just the catching mechanic killed this game. And this is something that kind of has become a greater issue with Pokemon on the Switch in general. For me, a big aspect of Pokemon is forming a bond with my team and catching every Pokemon and naming every Pokemon and not having doubles. Ever since Let's Go, they encourage you to catch a ton of Pokemon, and you get experience for that. And I mean, in the case of Let's Go, you literally can't progress at certain points unless you have your Pokédex filled up to a certain point. But that issue aside, I think Let's Go are actually really good remakes. I think I mean, we talked about the polish in general. I mean, this is the most polished Pokemon game. This is the best looking Pokemon game, in my opinion, if we're not talking about pixel, black and white sprites. And even stuff they did with like the post game, having the master trainers for every Pokemon, it just added like a nice level of replay value. So in terms of just as remakes, I actually think they're pretty good. I just wish, and another thing, you can't play with a Pro controller. Stuff like that just, it pisses me off. But as actual just games, looking at it outside of that, I think they're pretty damn good.
I mean, Tucker, you followed a similar track to that too.
I did, yeah. And the only other time I believe we've really talked about Let's Go in depth was one of our earlier videos, which was the Great Kanto Debate, in which we discussed sort of Kanto as a concept, but really, or as a region, but that sort of spun out of our disagreement about Let's Go, which is I, over the years, have grown to appreciate Let's Go more for what it added to the series, for, as Bo was saying, being the most polished, the most visually impressive Pokemon game and technically sound in this modern generation. But for me, it is a hard game for me to want to experience, because I do think that Kanto is, at least in my opinion, a poorly designed region. I don't have any fun going through these super linear routes, and everything is super blocky, and it feels really restrictive and like what's what I'm looking for? Like pushing down on me, like it's a weight. Claustrophobic, yeah. Because I'm missing the vistas that you get with the cinematic camera angles in Gen 6 and 7 and the environmental variety that Kanto just doesn't have. And of course, it's an older region. I understand these concepts that are being pulled forward from literally the very beginning of Pokemon, but where Let's Go really shines for me is in the places where it just says piss off and bye-bye to what Pokemon has previously established. The reason I say that this is clearly, in my eyes, a Gen 8 game as opposed to Gen 7 is the main thing about every Gen 8 game, I guess except for maybe BSP, but only kind of, is overworld Pokemon. For the first time in the series, this was the first time that they showed up, and that was a magical moment. Watching that trailer and be like, the Pokemon are just out there, and I can go along with a friend. I can have them they can going behind me. I can ride on top of the Onix and the Charizard. Like, these are like amazing Pokemon moments in my mind, and memories of experiencing these for the first time. That were a lot of these concepts carried forth and remixed and tried in different ways in the future games. The changing the catching mechanics, of course, that sort of came back in a different way in Legends Arceus. It's not just throw a Pokeball. There's the dodging aspect of it. But I appreciate Let's Go for its Let's Go aspects and not for its Kanto aspects. I don't like Kanto, but I like its Go integration. I like the Pokemon in the overworld. I like the Pokemon following you. I like the co-op concept. I even like it being a one-button, one-controller game. I've got my Pokeball Plus there behind me. Played the entire game with that. Had no problems with it. But, of course, I wish that had been playable with a Pro Controller. It doesn't really make sense why it's not. But I've warmed on the games, but they're still lower for me because they're not very fun for me to play. But I respect them a heck of a lot.
I think another reason that I personally wasn't super into them when they came out was just the fact that they were the first Pokemon games on Switch. These were our first HD Pokemon games.
Yeah.
So to get Kanto was just not what we wanted. So
it's the 3D World thing. 3D World Odyssey.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I really like Let's Go. I feel like as I've gotten older,
not wiser.
No, certainly not wiser. I think I've come to hold them in a little bit of a lower regard, and I'll talk about why, and I think it'll be interesting to sort of discuss what this game sort of foretold for the games after it. But at the time, I was really excited about Let's Go because I was pretty worn down on Pokemon prior to this. I don't hold Gen 7 in the esteem that Tucker does. I think that Gen 7 is totally fine. Hell yeah, Bo. But what they were...
Why do you guys go take a start fucking channel, all right? Leave me behind.
To me, Let's Go was this opportunity to just casually reconnect with Pokemon. And I also really like Kanto. I think Kanto is a really simple but iconic region. And so revisiting it was nice. Having it be so pretty and polished was nice. Playing it in handheld mode, most of the control issues are not there. And I agree. I agree with somebody who said this. I forget who. So maybe I'm disagreeing with somebody if they didn't like it. Bo, you didn't like the catching. That's what I like the catching. Because I view Let's Go as its own little insular experiment in the Pokemon universe. And to that end, I liked flicking the balls on the touchscreen and just playing a casual experience. What I think Let's Go sort of telegraphed to me, and almost Legends Arceus telegraphed the other side of the coin, is that Pokemon in its offshoots can be for different audiences.
Yeah.
And viewing Let's Go as a sort of casual entry point into the franchise, I think it's successful. My problem is, as I kind of want to talk with you guys about, are sort of the fact that I think some of its most casual elements are what were retained and brought into future games in a way that I didn't like. I think some of its great ideas, like the overworld Pokemon, were nicely brought forward. But in Pokemon's never-ending quest to make the games mind-numbingly easy, I think some of the worst excesses of Let's Go became something of staples. Be it, your Pokemon has high friendship. Now it's just going to sometimes not die when it wants to, and things like that.
Most egregious, of course, in BDSP.
Yes. I think that Let's Go, in a lot of ways, pushed the wrong elements of the series forward. Like, I'm totally with you, Bo. I think that Pokemon's modern fixation with catching Pokemon in volume opposed to team building is a mistake. She goes by Tama Hiro now. Tamashi Hiroka is what her channel used to be. One of my favorite voices in the Pokemon community, period. She talks a lot about this. And I just think that Pokemon's about making friends with these little guys. It's not about having a warehouse full of them. until you want to with the Pokedex or whatever. But it felt like Let's Go became the first step towards the Pokemon Company saying there is a right way to play Pokemon, and I don't think that was the right design influence to take when I think that otherwise Let's Go could have just been this little window into this casual Pokemon universe I like to revisit sometimes. So what do you guys think about the elements of Let's Go that sort of bled beyond it?
The
Bo?
overworld encounters is definitely the best
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
I think I'm not even
And
sure
maybe
if
the best thing that
Scarlet-
happened to Pokemon.
Yeah. I don't even know if Scarlet and Violet has random encounters. Does it? Do either of you know?
You're the one who's been
I
pulling
don't
this
even
game
know.
apart from other people's angles.
But anyway, Sword and Shield still had random encounters and overworld encounters. I think that was perfect.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't know if either of you get into is shiny hunting, though.
I'm a big shiny hunter.
I was not a huge fan of Let's Go at the time because, in my opinion, I like having the option to do both. I like being able to have the encounter or just see them on the overworld. So when because I used to watch a lot of like shiny hunting streams. So when I would go to a Let's Go shiny hunting stream and the person's just sitting there with the controller on the desk, I'm just like, you're sitting there watching a screen. You're not, at least shiny hunting in the older games, you had to like do something a little bit. I like breeding for shinies.
Yeah,
so
you
I
gotta
didn't like
press
that.
leave, walk in a circle, and then
Exactly.
Hope for the best.
That's something. It keeps you
Yeah.
engaged a little bit. But overall, obviously, a net positive having overworld Pokemon, and what you're talking about with the games getting too easy. This is something that I always I never fully understand because
Sure.
I've been playing Pokemon since I was 8. I've never had an issue with difficulty ever. Obviously, yes, BDSP they toughed it out for you. Thanks, Heracross. That sucks. And they should definitely give options to turn off like experience share and all these things. But I've never fully agreed with the Pokemon's too easy now because they've always been kids games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to that point in particular, first to your shiny hunting point, that game completely blew up the shiny Pokemon value economy. Like you could just
It did.
Holy
Well, Pokemon Go did, to be fair.
that's
Once
I
you
mean,
could trade them.
that is actually an even better point. But I'm not one of these community day sickos who like catches 35 shinies of the same type and
Yeah, that's what
trades
my
them
brother
on the
does.
black market. But yeah, to your point about difficulty, Bo, what I think about is you're totally right. In the sense that Pokemon has never been overtly challenging, but I think that now Pokemon is restrictively easy in the sense that they no longer give you the options that we're talking about. The sort of always on experience share is a mistake. I think that the tough it out things being just endemic to the gameplay is a mistake because
Do we know if that's back in Scarlet and Violet, Bo?
I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
It
We'll
probably
see.
is.
Well, we'll see in
It
a
probably
week.
We'll
is.
see. Yeah, it probably is. It's just like the Pokemon Company is making conscious decisions
It's
to
not
make the
Legends
games.
Arceus.
Yeah, but they are making decisions to make the games consciously and unchangeably easier than they used to be, and that's my problem. Not that they were ever incredibly difficult, but that I think they've become a degree more mindless than they used to be because experience has no real
Experience is
weight
literally
anymore.
handed out like candy. Thank you. I'll be
Well,
here all
once they
week.
started making it so you get experience for catching Pokemon, and that goes into the whole design philosophy of having
Yes.
you catch a bunch of Pokemon.
Yeah.
I mean, in Legends Arceus, which we'll talk about in a little bit, you barely even have to battle in that game because you're catching so many Pokemon. So
So battling's bad in that game, but we'll talk about it.
Well, here's the thing where I am most conflicted about Let's Go. As we're wrapping up our Let's Go section here, is there's a world in which Let's Go is my favorite Pokemon game. It's not this one, but it's not this one because of how restrictive the map of Kanto feels to me. It's not that fun to have Pokemon in the overworld when there's only like 3 blocks of grass I could possibly go through anyway, and I'm going to run into the Caterpie no matter what, regardless. But if Let's Go had been expanded out and Kanto had been sort of reformed to have their routes be a little bit wider and the streets and stuff just give you a little more space to run around to accommodate for 20 fucking Caterpies popping out of the grass at the same time. I really do think that I would have enjoyed that game a lot more, obviously because I said the restricted nature of it, but because I am someone who already doesn't like the consistent battling of wild Pokemon specifically. I don't mind doing it in terms of trainer battles, but just having Pokemon encounters with wild Pokemon be catch it or run away is perfect for me because that's what I was gonna do anyway. So I do think that for me, in terms of pacing, in terms of removal of grinding, in terms of having, frankly, there be more engagement of aiming the Pokemon, waiting for it to go in and out, and like using the berries and stuff. The catching mechanics of Let's Go are probably my favorite part of that game, and it's fine that they haven't been continued forward. They still exist in that game, but in terms of the way that is paced and balanced, I personally that speaks to me on how I'm already playing Pokemon, how I want to engage with Pokemon now. While I don't think that the gameplay philosophy should everything be designed around you got to catch as many Pokemon as you can. Just keep on catching them. That's not like I don't catch 30 of each Pokemon. I catch one of each, but I also don't mind that it's there because you don't really have to engage with catching tons and tons of Pokemon as long as you're catching each of every species, which is how I play those games already. So it's a pro and con balance for me, but in that regard, it was a positive thing, but it was also a positive thing in a negative way for me. So like, I don't really know how that fits together.
Yeah, I think it's an idea that, like most ideas in Gen 8, could have been taken further and probably needed more time to be thought over. And I think you make a great point about when you're basically retaining the original map, you're going to run into these choke points that are sort of at cross purposes with what you're trying to do to the overall, structure of the game. So I think that if I were to revisit Let's Go and really think about its design, I think I would like it a lot less. But as just as a casual Pokemon experience, I enjoyed it, and I still maintain that I would really like Let's Go Johto if they sort of took some of the things we're talking about here to heart, because I know that people from the Pokemon Company are listening. But I think that a second crack at this idea could be quite effective. But I don't think we're gonna get that because we've got a new house of remake. And that is ILCA Inc.
We should have gotten Let's Go Sinnoh. That's what should have happened.
Yeah.
Well, we joked about this. I think we even almost made a video about the idea. Or no, actually, we did make some sort of videos like what is the Gen 4 remakes going to be? I wasn't quite convinced that they were going to happen. Abram was, but they were talking about the idea that people would be really fucking pissed if they made a Let's Go Sinnoh. But we were thinking about there was two ways that a Gen 4 remake could go. It could go Let's Go Sinnoh because they haven't made a Let's Go game since before Sword and Shield, and it seems like that's the cycle that we're going on now. Or it could be Gen 4 in the Gen 8 Sword and Shield engine. Big open areas and make the Pastoria Great Marsh and a wild area and like really expand on Sinnoh in these interesting and engaging ways with overworld Pokemon and stuff. And there was secret option Z that we failed to consider is hire another company for their first time in the history of the Pokemon franchise, and just do Gen 4 again.
ILCA, the famed developers of Pokemon Home, the software. That's their history.
Yeah. Hey, they also helped port Dragon Quest or whatever.
Well, yeah, and they're working on One Piece Odyssey, so good for them.
Yes.
Played it at PAX, not a good game.
Neither is Pokemon Home. Not a great game.
Neither is Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. So
talk to me, Bo.
I'm gonna be honest. I have not beaten these games. These are the only Pokemon games I have not beaten because I just don't want to. I think I got about halfway through Brilliant Diamond, and this is the only Pokemon game I have not beaten. But even playing Sword and Shield and playing Legends Arceus, and obviously Let's Go, which we talked about, there is a level of polish that Game Freak does offer. These games don't even meet that.
Yeah.
These are the most boring 1-to-1 remakes they could have possibly made for for Diamond and Pearl, which were already, in my opinion, not great games. Platinum was my first Pokemon game, and I Platinum improves it a lot. They didn't remake Platinum. They still kept the slow ass just flow of Diamond and Pearl, and it's not good. And that's really disappointing because I have a very soft spot for Gen 4 Pokemon, and Sinnoh is a really cool region, but at least we got Legends Arceus as kind of like a little bit of a...
As recompense?
Yeah, a little bit, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
I have especially with time, I've developed a very complicated sort of set of feelings on Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, because I think that they are emblematic of why Pokemon is never going to change. But I also think that they are a net positive for the series.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because Game Freak was being given an impossible task. and that is make a Pokemon game every year. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's a Game Freak A team, a Game Freak B team, and responsibilities and games are split between them. But even then, especially when you're asking them to make console scale Pokemon games, when you're the Pokemon Company and you're greedy and you need a Pokemon game out every year,
Mm-hmm.
you were going to kill everybody at Game Freak was going to die. It was going to be like rowing the boat in Ben-Hur. People are just going to start fucking dying of exhaustion at some point along the way, right? Bringing in ILCA, I think, checks the box of yearly Pokemon games, and I am telling you on my fucking life, there will be Gen 5 remakes from ILCA next holiday.
Holy Christ!
I don't know
even
about
want to
next
think about
holiday.
that.
Maybe a year after, but it will be on
That-
Switch and it will be from ILCA, and they will be the saddest day of my life.
and because here's the thing, right?
Finally.
For the sake of Game Freak, and for the sake of funneling resources and development time into what's actually going to progress the series,
Yeah.
being core generational titles or ideas like Legends Arceus, you need to unencumber the least important thing, which are, in my opinion, the remakes.
Yeah.
Bo, like you, Platinum was Blue Mystery Dungeon was my first Pokemon game.
Ooh,
My first
spicy.
Pokemon game was Pokemon Platinum. And so I hold Sinnoh in very high regard. But Platinum, for its hardware, is the best that Sinnoh is going to get, right?
Yeah.
You think about the
It
first
still is, unfortunately, till this
Yeah.
day.
you think about the first three Pokemon generations when they were being remade, there were serious functional material reasons to remake them. Physical special split hadn't happened, new typings to integrate, various fundamental things to how Pokemon existed as a franchise and operated as a game. The old generations needed that. We're at a point now where, brother, the Pokemon series is not fundamentally changing how stats are rolled and generated anymore.
Yeah.
Pokemon exists. It's solid. You can move a Pokemon from Gen 4 annoyingly, but you can move it into the future. So I don't want Game Freak wasting their time remaking more games. I want them looking forward. And ILCA makes it so they don't have to look backwards anymore.
Yeah.
Now, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl suck. But I'd rather that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl sucked and that Game Freak was able to funnel everything they had. They could put their whole game into Scarlet and Violet.
Freakussy.
Thank you. That's better. I'd rather they did that than waste time remaking Gen 4. Because it would have been amazing. But I'm much more concerned about where the franchise is going than where it already was.
I'm in the exact same boat as you, but I have to push back on one thing.
Sure.
ILCA is not the best thing to happen to this series. Adding another development team is the best thing that could happen to this series.
Fair.
Hand it to
Could have been
any other
anyone.
competent team. Bring in
That's a great
Bandai
point.
Namco. All sorts of teams are willing to work with Nintendo. Would probably love to get the chance to work on the most prominent IP in the entire planet. But they found a team that had literally no history making these kind of games. Not from the ground up, not from remakes, not from nothing. They made software before this, and they dabbled in helping other teams do maybe kind of something. I don't know what they did. But the fact that they brought in ILCA is my problem, because frankly, I do agree with you. Unencumbering Game Freak, the remakes are the least important part of pushing the series forward. But what we had seen with previous generation remakes, primarily Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, is that because Game Freak was on these games, we could still be taking steps in these and I guess Let's Go as well. We could be taking steps in these remakes that still push the series forward, even if it wasn't a whole new region, a whole new set of Pokemon, new mechanics, new ideas, stuff like that. There were new ideas. There was identity. There was pushing the series forward in terms of Sora and new types of Mega Evolutions and the Delta episode and whatever it was for these games that continued the series forward. BDSP didn't have that because ILCA didn't have the experience. And frankly, I guess I don't blame ILCA for the bad games, because I'm sure they did the best they could. But also they made a bad game, so I don't like them. And that's really my problem with BDSP is I was really excited for Gen 4 remakes. Guess what? We're 4 Gen 4 boys here. Pearl was my very first video game, so we all have this reference for Sinnoh that I don't think a lot of people do. And I think maybe for good reason, because Diamond and Pearl, the original games, are slow. They have a weird Pokédex. They have problems with gyms. The pacing is strange. And guess what? Those all apply to Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl. Yes. Jesus Christ.
There's all 3, he evolves.
Those all apply to BDSP in ways that are baffling decisions. And when I think about BDSP, it's not like, oh yes, they remade my first video game of all time. It's, oh no, they remade my first video game. And having to re-experience basically one for one these games that I had grown up and had so much reverence for, and realized maybe they actually kind of sucked, was really disheartening, because there was the chance with lots of remakes, whether that's RE2 remake or all these people remaking games right and left. We got Last of Us Part 1 6 days ago or whatever it was.
And we're getting it in another 6 days. We're gonna remake it again.
That's true. People are remaking games to bring them to a modern audience that make you feel like when you played them the first time, they were great, and they still feel just as modern and great today. BDSP did the exact opposite of that, and it started pointing out to me issues with the Pokemon franchise that I never realized I had or could have. Is that I don't really like this linear route structure, and random encounters are really not quite that fun at all, coming off of the overworld Pokemon in Sword and Shield and Let's Go. And that having a balanced Pokedex is really important, and that I really wish I was seeing more than just Bidoof, Staravia, and Geodude over and over and over again. Oh my god, variety in a National Dex is so important to me. And BDSP has none of that, and unfortunately it also has this weird balance of difficulty that I think is probably the worst in the franchise, in terms of being super hand-holdy, and your Pokemon are dodging everything, and you're just getting experience right and left, and your team's super over-leveled. And then you hit the champion, and it's just like a huge spike. Or you hit the Elite Four, I guess, and it's a huge spike in difficulty that knocked me on my ass in a way that I've never experienced Pokemon before, but took me out of the game. And I was like, this is just annoying.
Oh, the Elite Four is the best part of that game. I went on a team of fucking level 45s and had to, like, strategize because for whatever reason, and I don't know why they did this, the Elite Four and Champion in BDSP are competitively bred Pokemon with competitive movesets and items. I don't know why, but it is and this was interesting about BDSP. That is some of the most fun I've had playing Pokemon game in a long time, is beating that Elite Four. And to be honest, I don't think BDSP are that bad. To me, I'm like, we're doing Pokemon again.
Yeah.
My issue with BDSP exists largely on a conceptual plane. Now, there is 100% to your point, Bo, and I want to bring you back in here when I'm done, is there are issues here that make no sense. My Honchkrow would be like, if the bottom of my hand is the feet of my Honchkrow and my fingers at the top of his head, he existed like this for the entire game. The bounds of the battle screen were not right, and you couldn't see my Honchkrow's head. Like, just silly things like that. Graphical issues, technical issues. Makes no sense.
The cinematic camera in the cutscenes, when it like clips into the environment, there's like a stair covering the corner of the screen. It's like, how did you just put the camera somewhere else? How'd you not think of that?
Yeah, Bo?
I'm curious if you guys had this issue with Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I have a very nice TV. I have it's an LG C1 OLED TV. Playing this game on that TV it's terrible. I don't know what it is, but like it's actually blurry. So I've had to play it in handheld. It does look better in handheld, and maybe it was designed with handheld in mind. That probably it's a DS game, but that was another big issue for me. It just looks really bad.
Mm-hmm. It looks way worse. The bigger the display you look at BDSP on, the worse it gets. Yeah. And it's a weird issue because Switch games look worse in handheld. Be an issue. Yeah, Switch games look worse in handheld and get more power in the dock. Mm-hmm. That's not the case for this one for whatever reason. Whatever kind of junior programmery made that happen, I don't know. But you're totally right. But I do contend, when you're in battle, these games look quite nice. And you got some nice reflections on the ground. You got a cool battle scene behind you, and your trainer's looking nice. There are elements of BDSP that I do like. I think that BDSP gets all of the shit it gets is deserved, but I think that there are elements of it that do deserve praise that aren't talked about. Shout out to 15% of BDSP is what I'll say.
Sure.
But I just love Pokemon, so I just like playing the game. It gets as simple as that for me at a certain point.
The reason I find it so hard to even praise those elements is because, as I was saying, Gen 8 with BDSP, it was the first time that I had been really disillusioned to Pokemon's issues in a way that makes those elements stand out so much starker than the elements that are worth praise. I do think the idea of reformatting the Underground into the Grand Underground with the rooms that you can find Pokemon in, these are good ideas, but they're good ideas that could have been implemented in any other version of this game that was also better in all the other ways. Because it's not like, oh wow, only BDSP could have the Grand Underground. Right. Holy shit. This is what BDSP has. No, you could have throw Grand Underground and Galar or Callus or whatever. And everyone's like, oh, that's fun. But I really just have a hard time reconciling those positive things when, for the first time in my life, I was like, man, Pokemon maybe is not actually good sometimes.
Hey, but they're made in Unity, so people can mod the shit out of them.
Yeah, and
were these games made in Unity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, that's not a joke.
I actually didn't know. That's crazy.
Yeah, they're actually made in Unity. Yeah.
Abram, you brought up a good point earlier about ILCA and just how this has alleviated Game Freak to focus on what matters. My question, well, it's funny first of all because Game Freak is releasing 2 open world games in 1 year, which is so basically that didn't happen. Second of all, my question is, at what point do you think they decided to make Legends Arceus its own game? Because in my opinion, it's pretty obvious that Game Freak was going to make a Gen 4 remake, and then at some point, maybe during COVID or something, they decided, okay, we're just gonna go crazy with this, make it a new region. It is what.
Yeah.
You can barely see any landmarks, but I think it's obvious they were going to do it, and then at some point they were like, let's just make this its own thing, and then have ILCA come in, because I can't imagine. Game Freak's pretty prideful about not having other developers step in.
Yeah, which is they've literally never done it in 25 years up to that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm correct, Bo, in thinking right that Legends Arceus was developed alongside Sword and Shield. That's true, I believe. Let me do a quick.
I don't know if it was developed alongside
Google.
it.
Yeah.
I'm not great at development history stuff. I mean, I can tell you.
No, there's no way, because that would mean Legends Arceus was in development for almost 6 years. So there's no way.
Maybe alongside the Sword and Shield
after Sun and
DLC.
Moon.
No, because if people thought about the ideas of Legends Arceus for 6 years, they would have made the game differently.
Hey.
Well,
Here, I was right.
We're
I was right.
What?
Game
Okay.
Freak confirms Pokemon Legends Arceus started development before Sword and Shield's launch.
Oh, well, yeah, but right before launch. I mean, that's any developer, right? They typically start planning.
Before launch. Sorry, shit. Hold on.
Right.
Yeah, well, that would make it in development for 3 years, which I think is probably somewhat reasonable.
That's about right for a Pokemon game.
Yeah, no, Bo, you're right. I'm wrong. Game started development in late 2019.
Yeah. So I do wonder if maybe COVID came along and they were like, okay, well, let's just make this its own thing. And then, and they also didn't release a game in 2020. That's also worth noting, and they don't do that. So that was weird.
And but that means that the joke that Abram and I always make, mostly me, is that ILCA.
Oh wait.
They hired a team of monkeys at ILCA to make a Gen 4 remakes in 8 days.
Wait.
Kind of happened. I mean, closer than it should be.
Yeah.
Hold on. Maybe I'm right.
New research.
Confirmation that Pokemon. This is from a talk they gave at CE. At what the fuck is this? CEDEC. Okay, it's some kind of Japanese trade show. This is from Lutu, who was talking. Shout out Lutu, by the way, another person I like in the Pokemon community. Confirmation that Pokemon Legends Arceus began development in fall of 2018.
Those are pretty different.
So that's still 2 years after Sword and Shield would have started, though.
Yeah, but in the process of it.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. The point is,
well, we completely derailed the point.
Yeah. What was the point of that? I don't know. Why were we trying to prove this again?
I was hoping if I said the point is, we'll get back. Oh, you're asking if we think that they were making Gen 4 remakes and then they became Sword and or Legends Arceus.
I think they probably were.
It's an interesting idea. I've actually never thought about that before.
Yeah.
I wonder if one day we'd ever be able to get that sort of answer, because I get the impression that BDSP were not games that had especially long development cycles. So
no, I mean even when they revealed it versus the 6 months later we got the launch trailer because they revealed pretty close to release. It actually looked better. Which,
yeah, it did.
For a game like that, you wouldn't really expect that to happen. You would think by the time they revealed it for a pretty 1-to-1 remake, it would have been more or less done. So that was a little weird.
And I think the most interesting thing that Gen 8 will be known for is its experimentability, and that is nowhere more obvious than the 6-month time span in which we got the least experimental Pokemon games and the most experimental Pokemon game. And the fact that they were announced alongside one another. There is a video on YouTube of me sitting there and going, oh no, when I see what BDSP looks like, and then be like, what? Huh? What? As soon as you flip to Legends Arceus, it's like, this is... I never even conceived that they would even tackle this. And I think that disparity is why I'm still really excited for Scarlet and Violet and excited to see where Game Freak goes next. And I'm clarifying Game Freak goes next and not Pokemon, because I do think there's still this work that is ILCA hanging on the side, maybe making a crappy black and white remix, or maybe a better black and white remix. They have more development time, who knows? Maybe it could be okay. But is that Game Freak now has flexibility in a way that they never did before, because you think about just the structure and pacing and concepts of gens 1 through 7, and it was, we're always doing the same 8 gyms, and we're doing the routes, and defeat the Elite Four at the end, and that's it.
We're doing the totem trials, Tucker, and they're very different.
My bad.
Gen 1
You're
through
right.
6. 1 through 6 are the same.
And now with Gen 8, Sword and Shield somewhat excluded, although there's a wild area in there, is we've got Legends Arceus, which says no to basically everything of Pokemon except for the catching, and we've got Scarlet and Violet that are say yes to some of the things that Pokemon has done, but yes to some of the things that Legends Arceus has done. And I think that convergence makes me excited, but also, from my perspective, makes Legends Arceus the most praiseworthy game we've almost ever gotten out of the Pokemon franchise. I contended in our review, and I will continue to contend until we see how good Scarlet and Violet is, until we see what they do next after that. The most exciting, ambitious, and in my opinion, one of the best Pokemon games we've ever gotten, Legends Arceus.
What do you think about these games, Bo?
I completely agree. Legends Arceus is Black and White 2, or just Gen 5. I kind of want them all together. That's my favorite Pokemon game. Legends Arceus is the best Pokemon game we've gotten since then, as someone who also loves X and Y. But playing Legends Arceus was it, not to bring up the meme of just bringing everything back to Breath of the Wild, but it felt like Breath of the Wild for me. As a lifelong Pokemon fan, Pokemon is my favorite franchise. Playing Legends Arceus made me feel like that first time I played Breath of the Wild. And that's kind of a good thing and a bad thing. I never want to replay Breath of the Wild. And I don't think I ever really want to replay Legends Arceus.
Well, you can replay Breath of the Wild in about 6 months when they release Tears of the Kingdom.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a DLC. But Legends Arceus does so much good for the franchise and moving it forward. And obviously it takes... The DNA of it was in Let's Go and Sword and Shield with the overworld Pokemon and the wild area. Obviously, Legends Arceus makes those games feel a little bit more prototypey, especially Sword and Shield. Yeah. But once again, I mean, Scarlet and Violet might make Legends Arceus feel like a prototype.
Absolutely. I think it totally will.
Which is, it's a weird place for the Pokemon franchise to be in, where Gens 1 through 7 all felt very distinct, and they all were going for their own things. Well, maybe not Gen 1 and 2, but it's going to be interesting going back. But the first time I played Legends Arceus, that was the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game in over a decade, and I thank it for that experience.
Yeah.
Okay, Abram, shit on me now.
I'll wipe the shit off of you after it's done. Don't worry, I'm on you.
When you're evolving a franchise to the extent that you are with a game like Legends Arceus in comparison to what came before, you're basically throwing a brick through a window, and that's gonna break some glass, and you're gonna have broken glass all over the place, and you gotta deal with it, right? Would I rather step on that broken glass and play Legends Arceus again? No, but I thought that'd be funny to say. But I do think that Legends Arceus are very messy games. I personally do not. That's a good point. Ever. I'm trained to thinking that they're 2 games. Right, it's 1 game. Yeah. I don't like Legends Arceus personally. And the reason I say that is not because I don't think that they're full of great ideas, because I think the game is, with the exception of battling, which I take fundamental issue with, I think basically every idea this game has is a really good one. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that Legends Arceus took many of its own ideas to their natural conclusion. And I think about things like the catching mechanic, which I love the idea of in third person lobbing the ball. But for me, that ends up getting diluted a little bit when I catch every Pokemon the same way, when bait is basically use it or don't. It feels like the sort of the bones of a really interesting Monster Hunter-esque Pokemon experience, right? But to me, it ended up feeling very empty. It ended up feeling very simple. It ended up just not quite scratching the itch I had hoped for, that it was clearly trying to scratch. But nonetheless, there are really great ideas in it, and I think, Bo, that's probably where your comparison to like Breath of the Wild is really apt. I just think that Breath of the Wild got more of its ideas right on the first pass than Legends Arceus.
I think we'd all agree on that, frankly.
Yeah, but I feel like I wanted more, because it's such an amazing premise. And I really do love the idea of taking quests out of Jubilife Village and growing the village and going to these different areas and meeting my favorite Pokemon and having to interact with them as actual animals and figure out their behaviors and catch them. And because the game shares so much DNA with Monster Hunter, it has way more in common with Monster Hunter than it does Breath of the Wild in terms of the quest structure, in terms of the basically every area is a Monster Hunter map. You encounter larger,
open zone,
smaller
like
monsters.
Frontiers.
Yeah, absolutely. But it just didn't hit me the way I wanted it to, because there was not the level of complexity I think I was after, and I ended up in the same exact gameplay loop with little variance across my adventure. And so I find myself really excited about what Legends Arceus taught Game Freak, and as a sort of stretch before the jump of Scarlet and Violet, I am so glad they made these games first. So what I feel are mistakes of Legends Arceus will hopefully be already rectified by
Less than a
Scarlet
year
and
later.
Violet. So
9 months later, they fixed it all.
yeah, and which is why I'm afraid that they might not have. But for me personally, I do not like these games. I do not think they are
still just
very,
one game. Didn't change.
Yes, even if they were two, I wouldn't like them.
You probably like it less.
But I maintain that I think I really like your idea, Bo, about it being this attempt at ideas, because that's what it is to me. And I think to that end, on a macro scale, what it gives to the series for me is far more important than what I felt were the issues with it itself.
It's funny because I actually agree with most of what you said, but to me they're kind of, I don't know if I'd say positives, but I just don't mind them.
Sure,
I think the catching
totally
elements are a great point. They are pretty mundane. Like it's really cool just being able to lob the ball and using the different like baits and everything. And it evolved what Let's Go did, but to me it actually made it fun.
Fair.
So I enjoyed that. And I don't know if you guys did much of the post game, but when you get to the love tornado fucker genie, Enamorous, there are aspects there where they they started to do stuff where you actually have to like kind of, it's like a puzzle you have to solve. I want to see more of that, but you're totally right. I mean, it is, once again, it's a lot of half ideas, half steps that, as someone who plays Pokemon every year and consumes it every year and loves it every year except last year, it's nice to see Game Freak actually trying something new.
Sure.
Yeah.
The wild area was cool in Sword and Shield, and I do enjoy it, but this feels like they actually tried something. They actually really tried something. And as a Pokemon fan, as someone who plays every year, that just makes me excited for the future and Scarlet and Violet, and 5 years from now when we're getting hopefully technically competent games and games that look like they should be on Switch 2 or whatever, if that ever happens. So while I definitely agree with a lot of what you said, I do love them still.
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's interesting about the half steps that we've been talking about. With Let's Go, introducing Pokemon in the overworld, and then Sword and Shield having an overworld, but kind of a half-assed overworld. And I think that it's no more obvious than the fact that the wild area is literally just a giant L, and then the rest of the game is in these tiny little towns and crappy little routes that suck. But when you look at what Legends Arceus did, the brick through the window analogy, I think, is apt. But for me, it's a really important brick to throw, and I'm so glad that this brick exists, and for me, it's a great brick. I'm looking at this
bricks.
Brick, I'm like, God damn, I've never seen a brick this nice in my life. Although it doesn't look.
Tucker's bricked up.
Bricked up on a Tuesday afternoon. But is that where you see lack of complexity? I frankly I disagree with that, because I find these games to be significantly more complex than the other Pokemon games. Because you think about pretty much any aspect of approaching the pacing or interaction on a granular level of Pokemon. The battling being pretty much the only exception. The progression of Pokemon Legends Arceus comparative to the progression of any previous Pokemon game is leagues more complex. The idea of you need to, in order to progress, interact with Pokemon in a significantly more meaningful way than them being just obstacles, frankly, that you can defeat in 2 hits. I mean, that was that was random encounters, that was wild battling for every generation, even including Gen 8. And trainers being the same way. They became something that was additional, that you could seek out, that if you wanted to really engage with this aspect of the game, you could, and you could, like me, avoid it if you wanted to. The fact that the oh god, what are they called? Not the totem Pokemon, but the really mad Pokemon, the angry guys. Alpha Pokemon.
Well, those are the big ones, but the like the legendary
beta Pokemon.
No, the Guardians.
the Guardians of the Forest, whatever the fuck it was.
But those are much more complex, much more mechanically interesting boss battles than any gym battle that we'd gotten before. And I would say that just on like a specific, as I said, granular level, you're talking about catching of a Pokemon being simple in this game, which I do agree. I do think bait and associated items could have absolutely been brought to a more thoughtful conclusion, but it's already a more complex interaction to hide in the grass and use bait if you want to, and aim with the ball and choose what ball on a more complex level you use than in the past, which is press button and Pokemon Trainer throws Pokeball animation. And from those levels, I really find it hard to reconcile this game being simpler than past Pokemon games, because frankly I think breaking out of that mold and trying something new makes it the most complex Pokemon that we've ever got. And just to finally wrap up this point, I mean, you mentioned the feeling of emptiness for you, but for me that's freedom. That is getting rid of the restrictive shackles of the routes and the linear paths and having to battle a trainer every few steps and encountering a Bidoof or a Zubat or whatever it is. It's breaking free of that and let you approach it at your own pace in a way that, while yeah, there are areas that are empty, I'd rather them be empty than like closing down on me.
Yeah, I think you make an interesting point, and it actually raises something I was addressing in my review of the game, which is Pokemon, I think, has skated on its ability to be compared only to itself for a really long time. And so I agree with you, Tucker. When you compare Legends Arceus to Sword and Shield, the complexity is incomparable.
Yeah.
But I think Legends Arceus looked outside the series for so much design level influence that a lot of my criticisms are being put in conversation with the action RPGs that aren't Pokemon. And to me,
for the first time of the franchise.
Yeah, and to me, for the first time, but then also that's where I invite in sort of my criticisms that are, put against Breath of the Wild, or put against The Witcher, or put against, most saliently, Monster Hunter. I'm not saying that Legends Arceus is less complex than Sword and Shield. I'm saying it's less complex than the games whose design are informing
influencing
it. And that's kind of my problem, because just as
Frontiers
Let's Go was casual Pokemon game, I wanted this to be a really complex and thoughtful action RPG hunting game fusion. And I think what it ended up being in execution was just a sort of train that carried Pokemon from Gen 8 to Gen 9.
Sure.
So that's where most of my criticisms are kind of angled from.
Yeah. Can I say one final thing about Legends Arceus?
A final thing already? I was going to see if Bo wanted to raise any other larger things.
He can keep going. I got something else to say.
I think we've said most of what we need to say about Legends Arceus. I mean, something we didn't touch on too much was quests. I think that's, and it's like you said with Monster Hunter, that's such a big moment for Pokemon. I don't fully know how that's going to work in Scarlet and Violet. We know there's like the 3 different main storylines, and that's interesting. But quests and a lot of side quests specifically, that's a new thing entirely. So it adds replay value. I mean, I have over 100 hours in this game, and I mean that's a lot for me nowadays. So having just side quests, and I'm hoping they keep that in the future.
Actually, you know what? Let's talk about the battling.
We didn't even mention that. Actually, I forgot.
Everyone, start your thing about the battling, and then I'll maybe rebut it if I can.
I mean, I just don't think that I just don't think the battling is very good. I think that if you want to talk about the place where the Pokemon series has maybe the most design intent put, it's the battling, especially as you're saying, Bo, by the time you're hyper balanced and there's all these mechanics and ideas and battling in Gen 8. My problem with Legends Arceus battling is that it strips out everything to the point where battles are concluded in maybe 3 turns, and they're about do damage really quickly. There basically any moves that are setup moves have been changed to be kind of not useful at all. A lot of moves that used to have other secondary effects are now gone. I'm right in thinking held items are gone for this game, or is it nature or abilities? Both. There's my problem. So much of the nuance and complexity for battling was removed. And in the context of a single-player game, I get it, right? And battling is obviously not the foregrounded element of this, especially when sometimes battling a Pokemon means dodging its shit and throwing your little hacky sacks at it as it's golden or whatever. But And before Tucker says that he doesn't like battling and that it's good that battles are changed and different, what was great about battles in past games to me is that depth was always there for people who wanted it.
Yeah.
But Legends Arceus made it so that the battles only cater to people like Tucker who want to see a battle to its completion as fast as possible. There was no opportunity for me to strategize or do any of the things I like when I'm battling. It was basically do damage, be done. And I found that to be a humongous disappointment as somebody who probably views battling as maybe the part of the series that is most interesting to me. So that's probably my biggest disappointment with Legends Arceus personally.
You make a great point. I do wonder if they almost wanted to not even have battles in this game, and they felt the need, because we have the boss battles and they aren't battles.
No.
Well, they have like
they
moments where they have moments where you go into it, but
yeah,
it was not the design focus of this game. And
Yeah.
this goes back to what I was saying at the top of the discussion, with every Pokemon game on Switch being its own standalone thing, very separate.
yeah.
I almost would have preferred maybe if there was no battle.
Noble Pokemon, by the way.
Noble, yes,
Pokemon.
there you go, you got it.
Yeah. I had to look it up, but
I agree.
I looked it up and I still couldn't find it. Yeah, it just feels like they felt like they needed to put it in. But that's why they made them so fast, made battling so fast with the agile moves and strong style moves, because they wanted you to just get out of it and go catch more Pokemon.
Yeah.
So definitely a hindrance on the game, but I think they had the right idea, but we're probably told they can't do that. They need to have some traditional battling in there.
I mean, whoever higher up is like, hey, Pokemon it's about battling. That's the first thing you see when you boot up Pokemon Red is Gengar versus Nidorino, and they're like, battle, and I'm like, show me catching, please. But the thing that I completely understand your criticisms of the battling. I think it does make sense from someone's point of view, like much like yourself in some ways. Is that for the changes that they made to this game, including the stripping back down of the battling, it feels to me like more genuine design intent in terms of game synergy and pacing and flow, that I think that is, for me, a strong positive of the battling. Is battles are not the intent of this game, as Bo said, and it certainly is possible that they were never intended to be there at all. But when they are added, I think that Game Freak's decisions, and I talked about this a little bit in our Legends Arceus review, but we've got new viewers here. Hey guys, how you doing? I hope you're enjoying this review or this discussion. Is that the stripping back of the battles for me just feels like trimming the fat in a game where that fat, which is the stuff that you enjoy, it's tasty, it's sizzling in the pan, it's making those fajita sizzle, is not necessary in a game where the fat, quote unquote, the complexity, the intricacies of design are placed elsewhere and are frankly more prominent in this game. The catching mechanics, the complexity of that, the complexity of exploring the environment are so much more foregrounded in this game than battles ever were in terms of their complexity and the IVs and the using natures and stuff in those previous games. Because when you're talking about the battles being over into turns and focused on just doing as much damage as you can, my brother in Christ, that's how most people play Pokemon, and that's how I've played Pokemon for every single game up to this point. Even if except for I guess the final boss of Cynthia in BDSP, I've never felt like strategy was necessary, though I've always respected its inclusion and the fact that extends out to IV training and doing really interesting online battles. I think that's a great aspect of Pokemon, not one I personally interact with, but when you're thinking about only single player game, one that is design intent is focused on this open world, on catching multiple Pokemon, on the Pokedex being focused around not just catching one of each Pokemon, but observing their attacks and observing the environment, interacting with them in different ways. Battling is, if they had the battling in there to the nuance and complexity that you're talking about, I do feel like that would have been a hindrance of the direction that this game is going. And the fact that they stripped it back, to me, feels like a Game Freak that is confident enough to not have to feel pressured to include all the things that they've had in the past. It's like, hey, battling can be different in a game where battling is intended structurally and pacing wise way differently than any past Pokemon game.
Yeah, I just think that they should have completely reinvented battling then in that case.
Sure.
Because what they left us with was sort of a you're learning about dinosaurs, you're learning about things with bones in them, you're learning about evolution, right? There's that the idea of the vestigial structure, the bone that something has because its ancestor has it and it hasn't yet evolved to get rid of the bone, right?
Yeah.
If battling to me should never feel that way. I would have been much more interested in a completely different approach to battling. And it could have been something really different. It could have been your Chris Pratt and those dumb dinosaur Jurassic World. Is that the new ones called? They call Jurassic World. And you're like whoa girl, right? And you're using your palm to push Pokemon away or something, right? Come up with something that makes sense in the universe.
Mhm.
I think about when I was sick, I was rewatching some of Arlo's really long reviews. He was talking about Pokemon, Paper Mario: The Origami King, and the idea of like having the partner system or the badge system in name alone, and
Mhm.
how just get rid of it. Give us something that's actually designed for the intent of your
Bino.
game. Sure.
Battling in name only.
Give us something that makes sense in the context of your new design, not something that you've sort of like carried around in spirit. Is
Sure, yeah.
what I mean to say. But yeah, I got fucking A. I got to throw my Pokemon out and see them sit together. That's my favorite part of Legends Arceus. I'm not even making a joke. It's not me being facetious. That's a great feature. I got
Yeah.
to really like say hi to my Pokemon. I love that. I could go and pat them on the head. I really like that stuff. There were the little moments like that in Legends Arceus that I really appreciated. So
Yeah. Any final points about the battling, Bo?
No,
No, you done.
I kind of like where I said where they should have just not had it.
I agree with you.
If they were gonna,
I
half-ass
absolutely
it
think
a
that
little
could have been a great way
I think
to go.
even if they didn't change anything else and they just removed that aspect from the game, I think it still would have been fine.
Yeah. No,
How many
don't
trainer
disagree.
battles are there actually in this game? 10?
Oh,
There's
there-
not many.
Ones like you have to do through the story. Yeah,
Through the
no,
story,
that sounds
there's
like
not many. There's
I
just
probably
like
would have said 60 or
15
70.
I think he's fucking right.
You know, I don't know.
There's like 4 trainers in this game.
Yeah.
Well, here's the interesting thing about the trainers in this game, and the final thing that I want to say about this game. I was in these games. You almost got me there, but I'm not that stupid. All right, taking my guns.
I was referring to our
is-
individual copies.
Sure, we do have multiple games. Yeah, is the problem that I had with Sword and Shield story feeling really back-paced and not integrated through the course of the game, and also feeling rushed in some areas, is not present at all in Legends Arceus. And while I still think that Sun and Moon conceptually have a much more interesting story, and the integration of characters and world of Black and White have a really interesting story, Pokemon Legends Arceus is the first time that I felt like since those games there had been like real character writing and world cohesion in a Pokemon game that really not made me fall in love with the story, but respect it a whole hell of a lot more than what is done in most Pokemon games. Because Aim was right about the story. It's usually vestigial. What's the?
I used to eat those all the time as a kid.
What?
You know, you'd get the little pizza rounds and you put your cheese on it or whatever, your vestigals, lunch. Fuck.
Oh.
Just keep going. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to make a
Vegetable,
Lunchables
gotcha.
joke.
Oh my god.
Oh, okay. But the story in this game does end up actually taking pretty bold steps for the Pokemon series in terms of its writing and pacing, and there being these warring clans of the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan, and they have really different ideals about the way that the world should be held, and you're developing this town from the ground up, and you're part of this research team, and Laventon and Ikari are really interesting characters to continue to like meet up with across the course of the game, and sit down and literally have lunch at the cafe across the way, which is a form of connection to these characters, progression of their personalities by the end of the game when Laventon's finally like strong enough to leave the town because he's built up his confidence that the previous Pokemon games only touched on in bits. You've got your rivals, Hop you learn about across the course of the game, Bianca, Barry, these characters that I like, but that's more prevalent to this game because you've got one home base and you're able to learn about these characters and the people that are underneath them and the sort of the social structure of this world in a way that is so polar opposite to the way that most Pokemon games treat their characters, which is in Sword and Shield, you meet the guy who's got the sweat towel around his neck, you see him once, you battle him, and then he comes and gives you a Pokeball after, and that's like the last time you'll ever see him or ever know anything about him. And that's where my problem with Abrams' emphasis on this being my story like completely counteracts what I want on the story is they have characters. I want them to be well realized. I want them to have interesting development across the story. And what Legends Arceus did is have not more foregrounded focus on the story, because it's just about as foregrounded as any other Pokemon game, but give it a focus that other Pokemon games never could really have, because you're always traveling around the world. You're leaving Misty in Cerulean City, and you're probably never going to see her again. And that's just an element of this game that I don't think gets enough praise, but where I feel like Game Freak really did step up their game in terms of some of these being some of the best characters I've experienced in a Pokemon game. And even down to just like the side quest people who have little fun interactions. There's the guy who works in the basement of the main building and like a shop across the way, but these guys have been feuding for like years, so you need to like keep running back and forth between them because they don't want to talk to one another. Or you catch a Geodude for this woman who's scared of Pokemon, and suddenly she loves this Geodude, and this Geodude's helping her around the place. Like, these are human stories in a Pokemon game where you maybe have 5 characters per game and the other ones, and you get to know 2 of them. It's such a huge step forward. I really hope that there is a cast of developed characters in Scarlet and Violet, which we're maybe seeing hints of because you are returning to the home base of the school and you're traveling alongside some people in each of these stories. I really hope that that's strong in that game, but at least I can say like, hey, Legends Arceus, you did good in this one time.
It's hard for me to get excited after how good Sun and Moon was, to be honest, about a story in a Pokemon game, because Sun and Moon, I don't think they can top it, honestly. And a lot of people don't like Sun and Moon story because it's too much, but I loved it.
I plead the fifth on Legends Arceus' story. You can go back and find our review for what I said about the story there. I don't want to rehash all of this. And in short, I don't like it, but that's not a surprise to anybody here.
No. Time travel.
Time travel. You gotta love time travel. You gotta love all of these characters. I love them, and I remember all of them individually.
Yeah.
All right, so we got a problem, folks. Tucker actually asked people for comments. They started having conversations with people. I don't know what we're supposed to read out. It's been an hour and a half.
I forgot about this.
I forgot about this.
We were supposed to like pull it in during, weren't we?
Yeah. We've never done that before, ever. So
okay.
I don't blame us for not doing that.
Amateurs.
We also didn't tell them we were doing that. We talked about it in private, but it's okay.
Let's see.
Well,
but we've got. Yeah, I can start reading one.
Read out a couple thoughts, and then I think we should start rapping.
Okay. We've got a comment from Jordan Deeb, who's from Shared Screens, by the way. Go subscribe to them. He says, "Oh wow, there's a lot to say about this gen. In all, I'd say that the generation was great, considering the fact that we got 4 different mainline games, all ranging what they brought to the franchise. I think them ending with Legends Arceus is a good sign for the future, but I also hope they take the correct lessons from that game, and Scarlet and Violet will be the ones to show us if they do or not." Yup.
Sounds about like what we said, yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Should I move on? You want to read one? I can keep going.
You'll be the reading man. You're a reading man.
We've got a comment here from... No, that's not true. I read like 4 pages of this book for class the other day and I stopped.
You just have that on your lap?
I was supposed to read 100... No,
yeah, where'd that come from?
I got a little space under my desk, under the glass. Yeah, I was supposed to read 137 pages, and I absolutely did not. We got a comment here from Sith Scott, who's one of our new friends here in the Discord server, who says, "Legends is definitely top of the list. I kind of have a soft spot for Let's Go since I played with my niece, and it is actually a game she liked playing, whereas other Pokemon games were too complex or boring for her to play. Sword and Shield and BDSP were both just kind of meh for me. I did appreciate some of the quality of life changes, but I wish they gave us more things as optional things rather than things that were forced to have like party and shared experience."
They bring up a good point that I completely didn't experience with Let's Go, and that is it had local multiplayer.
Yeah.
I don't know if either of you had an experience with that, but I assume that probably was a pretty damn good addition to that game. I just never got the chance to do it because it was local only.
Yeah.
But
I mean, my issue with the multiplayer is that it just splits the party of the first player in half and doesn't account for what that does to anything in the game.
Yeah.
So it's basically like an assist
game.
mode. Yeah, it breaks the game.
Yeah.
I think that's a bad solution to multiplayer, but I think that in the context that our friend here is talking about, it's just right. And I think the fact that his niece enjoyed it speaks to Legends Arceus. Not a good first game for your child. Let's Go being a great entry point of the franchise for developing minds.
Pokemon Go players. they're all still developing.
We got a couple of comments here from Phil that I'll sort of piece together into one thing. He says, "My experience is Legends, Let's Go, Sword and Shield, BDSP." I think that's a pretty reasonable. I mean, I agree with that. That's
pretty fair. Yeah.
Ranking.
I agree.
Says,
hold on. I agree. You just hold on. Here's what you gotta do. I agree, but you have to switch Let's Go. No, you leave Let's Go. No, you put Let's Go in first place. You put you put Let's Go where Legends is. You put Sword and Shield where Let's Go is. You put BDSP where it is, and you put Legends where in third. That's all you have to
I
do,
would
and then I
swap
agree.
Sword and Shield and let's go. That's it.
And
Swap
he says,
everything.
this is my first generation jumping back in since dabbling in X and Y, and my first time really doing so with multiple games since Gen 2. Either way, this has been a decent generation for me, and it bodes well for future spin-off titles. But if the main lines are still like Sword and Shield and keep the 8 gym structure, it won't be a true step up from the Platinum era IMO.
Well, quickly, just because he got lost in here, Daniel says Gen 8 has been disappointing overall, and I hope Gen 9 can move the season in a better direction. Daniel, to answer the question you DM'd me privately, yes, she's dead.
A final comment of the day. he's messing with you. He's messing with you.
I'm not messing with you. I'm answering his question.
Jesus Christ. Franz says, all I'll say is that Sword and Shield felt like a glorified 3DS game in the way that it felt very similar to Gen 7 minus the wild area. So it was a bit disappointing, but Legends was a breath of fresh air. Hoping that Scarlet and Violet take the best things out of the last few games and puts it together in a cool new world to explore. I'm also very curious in seeing how co-op works. Aren't we all? If the multiplayer is cool, that would be my main selling point in buying it. Does anyone actually know how that works yet?
Well, hey, I thought that's what the trailer was about today, and then I got a fucking Ed Sheeran jump scare and I turned the
Yeah, that
trailer
was
off.
crazy.
But
I was streaming and I had to mute it immediately.
That's what I was about to ask you.
Yeah.
So you just muted it and you just rolled along.
Well, I turned it down really low and I
Yeah.
just would not stop talking the entire time. I just started talking really fast so that it would keep
Right.
blocking it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do here at Pokemon Company.
Rambling.
Well,
Cool.
boys, we did it. We talked about 4 different games. And I think it went pretty well. We covered them all. We covered most of the aspects of them.
The best
final thoughts?
game released this generation is Mr. Dungeon DX.
Absolutely not.
I was thinking about talking about spin-offs. I mean, we did get a number of them, even though none of them are particularly
They're all mobile
super prominent.
crap.
Because we got Quest, we got
Oh,
Master
yeah.
Sex.
Which one was next?
We got Master Sex.
Master Sex is great.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Sex.
Mr. Dungeon DX, Pokemon
Yes.
Cafe Remix, New Pokemon Snap, and Pokemon Unite. So
Pokemon
there were
Snap,
a number
hell no.
of them.
Oh, fuck
I
yeah.
would
But
say
you don't like the Pokemon Snap?
Another Pokemon game I did not finish. I put like 15 hours into it. Dude, they make you grind for some reason.
Oh,
What the
Pokemon
fuck?
Yeah, they
Snap.
do.
is
It's
so-
such
watch
a
a
missed
review for that.
opportunity.
It's so
Holy crap.
boring. Because I love
Yeah.
the original N64, but I
If
think
you can just do one level like once, fine. But they make
Yeah.
you replay levels. What the fuck?
that's
terrible.
really strange.
That's so basic of
thinking
you,
about that
Bo.
the other night.
You're totally right.
And
Right.
with a happy note to end on, we finished here, boys. Good work.
Yeah.
We
If
finished up Gen 8.
We finished Gen 8. We're Gen 9 and I don't know when we're going to upload this, but pretty soon. Couple weeks, maybe a couple days.
Yeah, not a couple weeks.
When does it come
It's
out?
less than 2 weeks already. 18th.
Really?
We got 10 days as of
10
recording.
days, yeah. We are in the
Jesus.
countdown.
I got to play a lot of
Yeah.
Sonic in the next 10 days.
I'm sorry for you.
Yeah.
I'm
Thanks
sure
for
it's fine.
watching.
I haven't played it.
I'm going to go downstairs and play it right after this.
I'm going to
so.
play Halo. Can we play at the same time, Tucker? Is that how PS sharing works?
We'll find out. If you turn off your Wi-Fi, remember?
All right,
So
so
you get Deathloop.
when we're done here, I need to go make because this is my new PS5, so I have to make this my
Oh.
primary system, probably, right?
I got 2 PS5s.
One of them doesn't really work.
It fucked up, yeah.
I don't know if this one have a Pulse headset. I see you flexing the Pulse headset in the video.
Oh, this is the worst headset I've ever bought. I can't
Seriously?
hear you, but look at the
That's so cool.
only a
jeez.
year old,
That's
falling
so cool.
apart. Awful build quality. This
Maybe you
is a
didn't have
Pokemon
like
video.
super giant sweaty ears.
Well, that is an issue too.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for watching this, for joining us along this long, rambling, but I think pretty fascinating discussion about Pokemon's Generation 8. And if you are from Bo's community, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. But if you're not from Bo's community, go be Bo's community. Go subscribe to him. Go join his Discord server. I'm not above plugging other people's Discord servers. I don't give a shit. The people who care about our server are going to stay active in our server. But subscribe here. Subscribe to Bo. Subscribe to the Pokemon YouTube channel, I guess. I don't know.
Subscribe to
Let's see
Pokemon
you
UK.
guys. Is that the better channel? Why that one?
Follow Mosado on Twitter.
Sure. Bo, any final thoughts? Anything you want to say about
Follow
about yourself,
Drill
about
on
the world?
Twitter.
Yeah, follow Drill on Twitter. That's the actually only follow Drill. That's the only account you should follow at this point in time. Any final thoughts on Gen 8 or?
Do you want to say anything to it before we go?
I'm excited for Scarlet and Violet, and I'm excited
Yeah.
to hopefully talk about it with you guys
Absolutely.
after we convenient.
100%.
But
Yeah.
Gen 8's pretty good. I think it gets a little too much hate.
Oh, there is one thing I want to say, Bo. I swear to Christ, if you get an early copy of Scarlet and Violet,
I'm trying so hard. I am trying so hard. I didn't even care about getting Bayonetta early. I'm gonna be honest with you.
But you did. You beat it before it came out.
I did, and I gotta get those views. But dude, Scarlet and Violet, please give me that early copy.
Holy shit! And it's not impossible because it's out there.
Yeah.
No, yeah, people in Spain have it. There's an English copy leaking right now. If you're watching this and you're afraid of spoilers, stay off the internet. Everything's out. So.
Cool.
All
End
right,
the fucking video. Goodbye.
End the goddamn video. Actually gonna structure this. Are we gonna go game by game, or
I was
are we
thinking
gonna talk
about
about overall, or? And also, you mentioned in your post asking for people. You mentioned Let's Go. I think that's a talking point in of itself because most people don't consider Let's Go Gen 8, but I do.
I guess
a lot of people
don't.
I do too. Fuck them. It's Gen 8. I think.
Fucking Mal Medals in that shit.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, it's a
great
Gen
point.
8 game. I think there's no good. I honestly think there's no good argument for it not being.
Yo, then let's talk about
I
that
agree.
in here. Yeah, no,
Sarah B does not agree.
Yeah, well, Joe Merrick can suck an egg.
He probably does. He's British, right?
He probably does.
I don't know what the Brits do.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Tucker Hazel and unusually by Botox Legal.
Botox Legal Advice.
We're gonna get there in a second. Yeah, it's a new channel, right? That Shonen Soup's not working out. It's time to do legal news.
Holy
yeah,
shit.
that's where I'm going next.
All right, let's try again.